I appreciate it. Thanks for riding with us today. We are going to kick off the new year with some very appropriate and realistic news. You know, over the or I should say on New Year's Eve, rather than trying to cover any other articles, I wanted to make sure that we were addressing the issue of the Council on Foreign Relations, because I think most Americans don't quite realize the extent to which the Council on Foreign Relations affects our current state of affairs. And so I was concerned about the fact that most Americans aren't even aware that it's happening, and I wanted to kind of address that issue by hammering through the total level of involvement that so many different organizations and groups have. Because when we're talking about the number of individuals and corporations and entities that are participating with this, you have to realize the depths of the deprivation of this type of a system. Because when we're talking about this level of involvement, it is a conspiracy of mammoth proportions. I mean, you think, or you see the levels of involvement from all of these corporations, and you recognize how much participation and influence they all carry. So many of them are tied together, and so I thought it was important to do that. I really wanted to talk, however, about the NSA and what we're seeing as the abuse of what's going on with the Fourth Amendment issues for every American. Now, you know, the truth of the matter is that at this stage in the game, an article came out the other day in reference to a couple, well, there were a few articles out there, but one, that the court upholds the laptop searches that are going on at the border. Now, this is the DHS's self-declared constitution-free zone. And I've got to tell you, whenever you hear something like the term constitution-free zone, you've got to wonder, who would think that that was an appropriate method or manner of speaking? I mean, this is the United States of America. We don't have something called the constitution-free zone. There is no freedom from the liberties and the Fourth Amendment restrictions against abusing our rights and our privileges, period, by anyone for any reason. The other article that hit was that the shipping companies, FedEx, namely FedEx and UPS, were exposed under a Der Spiegel article the other day in reference to the fact that they are allowing, or complicit or participating or completely silent or whatever, agreement by acquiescence to the National Security Agency intercepting electronics packages and installing spyware in either hardware format or software. Now, I got to tell you, folks, what this tells us is this blows the lid off of any argument that they've been giving us that this is really all about our safety and our security. If you believe at this point that we are not under a siege of treason by our own government, that we are not an undeclared enemy of the state, the claims that prohibiting terrorism and keeping us safe are irrefutably denied by these actions of the NSA and the FBI and all the other known and unknown agents and agencies that are out there that have placed our nation under a siege of a state of terror, sponsored, controlled, and executed by the government of the United States of America. Folks, I got to tell you, this is unequivocal at this point. The evidence is irrefutable. And for Americans to not utilize this as an opportunity to say, this is the one catalyst that we can say we're done with. We're done with it. We're done with you. We're done with the lies. We're done with the treason. We're done with the nanny state. We're done with the oppression. We're done with the scams. We're done with it all. Now, you know, many of you have read or seen the article that I've posted some time back about the concept of a siege, a literal siege a massive, peaceful, civil disobedience siege of our federal and our state capitals to place the federal government under notice, and our state governments, that we will not leave until they do. And I'm not alone in that. General Vallely, who's come out for standupamericaus.org, and he has basically applied the same or suggested a similar plan, almost verbatim. Today, or I should say, I don't know, sometime over the course of the last day or two, there was a second individual who came out and indicated the same essential issue, and and he's a retired colonel, and he has come out with a statement, and I'm going to run over this with you. It's called Operation American Spring. Now, it's on a website called patriotsforamerica.ning.com. Operation American Spring, Washington, D.C. in the crosshairs. The out-of-control government leadership must be stopped. So essentially, what this is calling upon is all patriots of whatever color, whatever stripe, whatever political ideology, whatever your sexual preference, whatever your orientation, however you classify yourself, put all of that aside. We have one goal, and that is the restitution of constitutional government, the rule of law, freedom, liberty of the people, for the people, by the people, from despotic and tyrannical federal leadership. The goal is for millions upon millions of Americans to essentially place the federal and state capitals under siege and stay there until they leave. Now, I recognize that that is a massive undertaking. I recognize that most Americans won't do it. But I got to tell you, if just 10 million, 15 million, 20 million of us will, we can achieve that which everyone says we cannot. You know, I hear people say to me all the time, well, I'm just one person. I don't know what I can do. I feel helpless. Well, I understand that. To be honest with you, that's the reason I started doing this program. I was one person. I was beaten up and abused by the system. I mean, I'm a guy who's got no criminal past at all, and I was charged with a crime I didn't commit. I actually spent multiple years in a federal prison over it for, in large part, my beliefs and my outspokenness. I believe the crime was just the catalyst to get me there. And I saw the dirt and the evil and the lies and the way in which our system would abuse someone in order to accomplish a goal or a task or a stated agenda. And it became apparent to me that there was that we were beyond the point of salvage. In fact, I've kind of coined the phrase, our government is beyond political salvage. I don't believe that the political process can resolve this. I don't believe that we have the time for multiple generations of a political process to resolve this. I believe that the people who are counting the votes carry more weight than the people who are actually doing the voting. I believe that under the state of tyranny in which we are currently existing, you can write and you can protest and you can try to pin down your leaders all you want, and it won't have any value. I believe that the Article 5 concept of a constitution or a convention of states and a constitutional amendment process may well work, but I don't think we have the time. I believe at this stage in the game that we have reached the point where Americans must recognize that we are no longer in a position where we can idly stand on the sidelines and expect change to occur without our active involvement. I believe the proof of that is the existence of what you see around you every day. 40,000 new laws. Did you hear what I just said? 40,000 new laws take effect yesterday. There are taxes that were eliminated, tax breaks that were eliminated, new taxes that have been added, new tyrannies and treasons, new abuse. by agencies which are extra-constitutional just by their existence. They have no authority to exist under a constitutional government. We did not delegate our authority to Congress to subdelegate that authority to unnamed, unelected bureaucrats who are unaccountable to us. The idea that Fedex and UPS would allow the NSA or the FBI or any other agency out there to interdict packages for Americans and install surveillance malware, hardware and software, before that device actually reaches your home. Something you think you're getting brand new in a package. I bought a hard drive just before Christmas. It's an external hard drive. Plugs in through a USB port so that I could back up copies of this show and have them available with me even when I'm not in the studio. I'm now afraid to use it. I can assure you I'll take it apart before I try. And I will format the drive in case there's been software placed on it. But hardware and even software can be placed under lower levels than you can get to on a normal formatting process. I'm pretty good with computers, folks. Been building them as a hobby since I was in my late teens. I'm afraid. And when you fear your government, you live under a level of tyranny that is unacceptable to anyone with interest in freedom and liberty. If this example, I mean, the quote in here from the security researcher Jacob Appelbaum, co-wrote the Der Spiegel article. He published it last Sunday, detailing how the NSA intercepts newly purchased computer products in mid-shipment. If a target person, agency, or company orders a new computer or related accessories, for example, TAO, the Office of Tailored Access Operations, can divert the shipping delivery to its own secret workshop. The NSA calls this method interdiction. At these so-called load stations, agents carefully open the package in order to load malware onto the electronics, or even to install hardware components that can provide backdoor access for the intelligence agencies. All subsequent steps can then be conducted from the comfort of a remote computer. Essentially, ladies and gentlemen, what that's telling you is that the computer that you order online somewhere may well have the Green Lantern chip or something similar installed before you ever receive it. It's a hardware piece of, it's a piece of hardware. It's an actual chip. And once placed into that device, is undetectable to you. But it enables anyone who is the controller of that device to gain access to your device and go through it, download the entire contents of your hard drive, look at the applications, look at your email. They can see in real time exactly what you see on your screen. Now, if you're going to tell me that that is reserved only for foreign terrorists, I tell you you're a liar. I tell you you're a fool. I tell you you're an idiot. Because we're not talking here about FedEx and UPS packages that are going to Afghanistan or Iraq or Iran. We're not talking about UPS and FedEx shipping packages to some enemy in the Sudan or Yemen. We're talking about packages that are going to people like you and me. We're talking about packages that go to people like Rush Limbaugh, perhaps Glenn Beck, perhaps Ted Cruz, perhaps Trey Gowdy. Now, in response to the Daily Caller putting out a request to these shipping companies to comment on this article, the FedEx media relations guy named Scott Fielder responded with the following. The answer to your question about permission, cooperation, etc. is no. There were other no comment responses. Fiedler, Fiedler declined to comment on whether FedEx was aware of the program or give a statement describing FedEx's official stance. UPS declined to comment on repeated requests from the Daily Caller. Now, in addition to that, that same article by Applebaum exposed the ability to hack private Wi-Fi networks from as far away as 8 or 10 miles. And coming from a radio background, I saw a lot of uninformed comments on the bottom of those articles about people saying, well, that's not possible. You can't get into a network from 8 miles away, blah, blah. Well, let me tell you something. You can. You absolutely can. And once they have access to your Wi-Fi network, which you think you've secured with some long and incongruous password, they have access to everything in your system. Not just the machine which they have placed the hacking device in, but every machine in your system. Ladies and gentlemen, I would say to you that this is beyond what any American could construe as a protection of us from the war on terror. We are no longer in a position where we are being protected by our government. We are now in a position in which our federal government is actively functioning on the principle that you have no privacy, no right to security. And I would encourage you, I posted it up this morning on our Facebook page and our website, americasvoicenow.org, and Patriot FB, a 30-minute speech that was given by Judge Andrew Napolitano. And it was from back in 2007. Somebody was gracious enough to forward it to me and send it over to me, and I'm very appreciative of that. The Constitutionally Ineligible Obama was the group on Facebook that sent it to me. And the article is, or the speech is titled, "A Nation of Sheep." It's a half hour. I got to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, it is a titanic speech. It is worthy of the half hour, and it should be mandatory listening for every patriot without exception. It explains, way back in 2007, what has then set the stage for the tyranny of today. This is exactly what I mean when I say, even if you trust this particular president, which back then was George Bush, what about the next one? What will they do with this expanded authority? If you haven't already made your resolutions for 2014, I know they're popular. I generally don't make them because I think they're a waste of time, and I think it's a little game that we play with ourselves to justify something, whatever that may be. But if there is a resolution that you're going to make this year, it should have only 3 words: read and resist. Read, because that is the only method by which you are going to actually educate yourself about the issues that concern you, your husband, your wife, your significant other, your children, your grandchildren if you have them, and if you don't, what will be your grandchildren. Ladies and gentlemen, we have reached a point in time in which if you are not willing to step outside the machinations of what is being purported and given to you as news and information, and you do not find alternative sources to avoid and bypass the mainstream media, you will never be aware of the danger level of the tyranny and the treason that is being perpetrated upon America. And mark my words, this is treason. This is treason under any definition. Now, the other day I posted up an article, and I encourage you to hear it as well. The retired General Michael Hayden, the ex-NSA chief, the guy who kicked all of this off under Bush, and even before that, back in the Patriot Act. And if you listen to Judge Napolitano, you'll understand why. He actually has said that this is, the argument here is ridiculous. That they're not doing the things that we say they're doing. But I have to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, we're not saying they're doing it. There are people who have finally have the courage to step up and say, what's going on here is treasonous activity. When you find that Fedex and UPS are working in conjunction, that Google and Microsoft and AOL and Yahoo and Facebook and Level 3 and AT&T and Verizon, the largest corporations in the world, the holders of all of this data, the holders of the keys to your personal privacy, are involved. When we hear that the NSA has worked with every spyware corporation that's out there, every antivirus system out there, to violate your privacy through either intimidation or outright breaking of the rule of law, you can no longer assume, you can no longer believe that what you're seeing is purely altruistic intent of the government for your best interest. We're going to take a quick break. I notice we're having trouble with our Spreaker stream this morning. I apologize for that. It's out of our control. There's something wrong with their network. That's not something we have control over. We'll be working. I'll try to fix it, but I don't think I can it's not something I have any control over. We're going to take a quick break. When we return, I'm going to talk a little bit more about this, and I'm going to expose some of the other things that are going on here, including how they are hacking into your iPhone and remotely turning on the camera and the microphone without your knowledge. Ladies and gentlemen, how much more proof do you need? You're listening to America's Voice Now. Follow us at americasvoicenow.org. All right, we're back. You know, all the evidence that we're seeing on a day in and day out basis now points to a level of overreach and abuse within our nation that is beyond what anyone can rationalize or justify as government inserting itself as your protector. There is no one who is intellectually honest and ideologically unbiased that can justify the actions on the part of the NSA, the FBI, and many, many, many other agencies, those we know of and the many we don't know of. There's an article out in Freedom Outpost. The NSA is in control of your iPhone, and it can activate the mic and the camera without your knowledge. This is a quote, again, from the same article in Der Spiegel. The NSA's ANT division, A-N-T, like the bug, develops implants for mobile phones and SIM cards. One of these is a spyware implant called Dropout Jeep, designed for the first generation of iPhones, which was still under development way back in '08. It makes it impossible for them, for them to remotely download or upload files to your mobile phone. It allows the NSA to divert text messages. Divert text messages. Browse the user's address book. Intercept your voicemail. Activate the phone's microphone and the camera at will. Determine what current cell site you're using. Capture the GPS coordinated logistics off of the phone. And you would have no knowledge that any of this is happening. You see, what this is all about, ladies and gentlemen, is a massive control grid. And I'm not saying it in some science fiction-ish manner, some Matrix-level manner. This is just plain old human beings acting as tyrants, traitors, and treasonous monsters against the nation that they are sworn to protect. Not from foreign invaders, but from domestic tyranny. You see, the problem we have at this stage in the game, and folks, when you've got the Associated Press talking about this, and you've got the New York Post writing the State Department, their headline, State Department whistleblower has his email hacked and deleted. The personal email account of a State Department whistleblower was hacked, and 4 years' worth of his messages, some detailing alleged wrongdoing at the agency, were deleted. The computer attack targeted the Gmail account of a diplomatic security service criminal investigator by the name of Richard Higbee. Quote from his attorney, "They took all his emails and then they deleted them all." They couldn't prove, they are working to utilize forensics to try to prove who's responsible for the hack job. But the hack was clearly sophisticated. And he says, obviously, somebody is not happy with something that my client, or Higbee, his client, is doing, and wanted to get that information and also cause him an inability in the future to have ready access to that. The emails included evidence about misconduct by top officials at the Department of State, communications with other potential whistleblowers there, and correspondence with members of Congress who were investigating the allegations. It includes private, secure correspondence between him and his attorney about their own legal strategies as well. Now, he's asked the FBI to investigate the hacking. What do you think that investigation is going to result in? You see, the problem is, at this point, ladies and gentlemen, there is no one that we, the American population, the American people, can trust and or expect to protect us from what we're seeing going on a daily basis. The entire system is so corrupted, so compromised, so co-opted, so indoctrinated, so brainwashed, that at this stage in the game, I truly believe there is nothing that is worthy of salvage within it. You see, I don't want to be protected from the microscopic, the infinitesimal risk of being killed by some foreign invader here who's figured out how to throw some medical waste into a pickup truck and blow it up. If it means that our society would be so fundamentally changed by our fear of our own government that we no longer communicate freely. We no longer think freely. We no longer exercise or have any right to privacy in our homes, in our cars, in our personal possessions, in our computers, our cell phones, our dialogue and contact with other individuals, in our banking, in our shopping habits, in our reading. You see, the problem, ladies and gentlemen, is when the government becomes so oppressive that they are oppressing us, utilizing the argument that we are in need of their protection. And I have to declare to you, that is not accurate. We don't need their protection at this level. And I would posit to you that irrespective of how they would try to couch this argument, the real truth is here that this is all about control. It's not about your protection. The truth of the matter is, the only concern that they have is whether you are producing for them, and if you were taken out, you're merely collateral damage. You know, a small hit to the herd. We have lost every tenuous connection to our constitutional basis and foundation for existence as a nation and the premises under which this nation was built. We have no further connection to a constitution. The Declaration of Independence that was signed in 1776 is now perhaps even more important today than it was then. I gotta ask you, there is a Democratic bill, and I'm going to talk about this in the fourth segment, that would end the death penalty for federal law violations, including treason, including use of weapons of mass destruction, murder done via torture, child abuse, war crimes, aircraft hijackings, sexual abuse, bank robberies, or the willful wrecking of a train. Using chemical or biological agents to kill would no longer result in a death penalty. Neither would treason or espionage. And I would submit to you, and we'll talk about this in depth, that this bill has been sponsored by Donna Edwards, a Democrat from Maryland, and co-sponsored by 7 other Democrats. And I do not believe it is altruistic in its intent. I believe they are setting the stage to protect themselves from what they know to be a coming uprising of Americans. And they are hedging their bet that they will win by placing this law into effect, just in case they lose. I would say to you that follows the concept of what Congress did just recently with a voice vote so that it was unaccountable to continue a ban on firearms that are undetectable. They don't really care whether somebody walks into a McDonald's and blasts you with a plastic gun, but they are deeply concerned about being able to have an individual wend his way through the congressional halls with such a device to get through their personal security. We have a president who has a forged birth certificate, a forged selective service card, a history as a foreign exchange student. He has done virtually anything and everything that he can manage to do to violate every basic tenet of what we construe to be the foundational principles under which our government and our nation operate, including moral principles. He has acted with intent and immunity and impunity against the best interests of the nation. He has set a tone from on high that virtually every agency in the nation is following with immunity and impunity. We are in a constitutional emergency. This is an exigent threat. I have to tell you, folks, if you're willing to allow this level of lawlessness to continue, our nation is lost to us. If you are not willing to stand up and field millions of Americans who will assemble in a peaceful, nonviolent, physically unarmed, massive, peaceful, civil disobedient uprising, with a commitment that we will not leave until we have restored the level of constitutional law in this nation that was the foundation of our government. These individuals who must attend this event must be willing to stay there and move in shifts as a family if necessary. First, you send your wife or yourself. Then let the other spouse step in and take over. Your adult children. But a representative must be there. And I don't care if you must sell your spare car or your ATV or your boat or even your home to get there. And stay as long as it takes. Because I'm here to tell you, all those things that you hold dear, all those things that you value, all those things that you perceive to be important in your life are about to be lost to you anyway. When we have reached this level of tyranny, I got to tell you, I don't know where the churches are. Why are they not? I don't know where corporations are. Why are they not filing lawsuits by the tens of thousands against the unconstitutional invasion of the data that their individuals, their employees, are carrying about in electronic devices in the constitution-free zones of the 100-mile border around the outskirts of the United States that the court just approved? Ladies and gentlemen, I've got to tell you, if you believe that the courts are the final arbiter of our liberty and our freedom, I have to ask you, where do you get that idea? How have you been so bamboozled, so buffaloed? How is it that you can believe that that is the truth? How is it? I got to tell you, this is so far outside the scope of what we can believably or willingly accept. We have gone beyond, above and beyond the call of duty to assemble and redress our government grievances, which have been exhaustively exposed. We have gone above and beyond the call of duty, where we have begged our government to operate in fairness and in truth. I mean, I don't understand how we can continue to sit on the sidelines and expect that what's happening to us today will not become even more dangerous as time goes on. How is that possible that we can do that? It's not. That's my point. In other words, what I'm trying to say to you, ladies and gentlemen, is that we are beyond a point in which we can expect our government to respond in a positive method by our redress, by verbal methods, by petitioning, by speaking out, by calling our legislators. They don't care. They don't care. And they're not about to change their policy. I've got to tell you, there is a quote from Alexander Hamilton, there's actually two, that I think appropriately sum this up. When we talk about the courts and what authority they have, here's what Alexander Hamilton had to say about it. It will be of little avail to the people that the laws are made by men of their own choice. If the laws are so voluminous that they cannot be read, or are so incoherent that they cannot be understood, if they are repealed or revised before they are promulgated or implemented, or undergo such incessant changes that no man who knows what the law is today can guess what it will be tomorrow. He also went on to say, in the first place, there is not a syllable in the plan under consideration and he was referencing the Constitution here, which directly empowers the national courts to construe the laws according to the spirit of the Constitution, or which gives them any greater latitude in this respect than may be claimed by the courts of every state. What he was saying there is that the courts on the federal side, and this was in the Federalist Papers. It was one of his writings in the Federalist Papers. What he was stating is that the courts on the federal side had no greater latitude to define the Constitution than the state courts, because the principle under which the Constitution was designed, approved, and ratified is, or was, the idea that the states were co-equal power and partnership with the federal government. That the courts in the states could override a federal abusive ruling. That nullification could make a difference. And when laws were so voluminous that they could not possibly be read, so incoherent that they could not be understood, that they were repealed or revised before they were even implemented, that they underwent such incessant changes that no man who thinks he knows the law today could possibly guess what it will be tomorrow. I invite you to look at the last just 2 years, since 2010. Look at the law of Obamacare. They are so voluminous that they cannot be read. And Congress refused to read them before they voted upon them. Did you know that the Patriot Act was passed back in 2001, literally with 15 minutes for the House of Representatives to read it? Do you know that they redefined the term banking institution, which was the only thing that was allowed to be modified or allowed to be invaded under the Patriot Act without a warrant based upon, and they changed the term banking to incorporate every piece of anybody that takes money from you. So it incorporates right down to your church, the local store you shop at, the post office. And they've opened the door up under redefinition to everything. Go listen to that half-hour explanation by Judge Napolitano. It's startling. It's infuriating. It's extraordinarily educational. The EPA. 40,000 new laws this year, not just from the EPA, but many among them. 6,000 new regs from the EPA. They write thousands per week. These laws are made by men. Men of our own choice. And the laws are so voluminous that they cannot be read. They are so incoherent, they cannot be understood. They are repealed or revised before they're even promulgated or instituted. Think of Obamacare. 17 waivers by the president himself of his own law, which he was willing to allow the country to go to bankruptcy over. And now he must repeal it himself. If they undergo such incessant changes that no man who may know the law today can possibly figure out what it will hold for them tomorrow. How can business operate in a climate such as that? We're not talking about big business like Google and Microsoft and IBM and Fedex and UPS. Those are the people who, as members of the Council on Foreign Relations, as I reiterated to you on New Year's Eve day, those are the people who are actually making the law. I'm talking about the small guy who runs a dry cleaner shop, a music store, a bookstore, the guy who's got a small manufacturing business where he makes widgets or pens, or he sits there and engraves a product. I'm talking about the guy who runs a little store where he sells Christmas cards. I'm talking about the small business where somebody develops and creates written web development software, or a new product that is a software tool. How can you possibly be in business when you don't know what the law holds for you tomorrow? How can you run a restaurant and have employees when today it's 50 and tomorrow it may be 25 before you have to pay Obamacare? And how do you know what the law is so you start just cutting people back? Ladies and gentlemen, we have reached a point where we no longer may sit idle and wait. We're going to take a quick break. I don't know whether that Spreaker app is working yet or not. It's confounding me. I don't believe it is. And what I'll do is I'll reload this entire episode up on there for those who utilize that Spreaker application. When we come back, we're going to talk about, and I'm going to have a guest on, Mike Slack is going to give us a call to talk about the issue of the Riverways and these hearings that are coming up over the course of the next week or so. It's important that you participate and be a participating member in this fight. If you're from Missouri, we're going to talk about two things. That and the brand new Missouri Obamacare bill that is destined, designed to defeat Obamacare and put it out of our misery. We'll return in just a moment. You're listening to America's Voice Now. Find us on the web at americasvoicenow.org.
It's about the restoration of our republic. We want to educate, encourage, enable the power. We stand for integrity, honesty, self-reliance, self-defense, and most importantly, no compromise on our foundational principles. This is America's Voice Now.
Find America's Voice Now on Facebook and at americasvoicenow.org. Here's Michael Evans.
right, good morning. You're listening to America's Voice Now. My name is Michael Evans. I'll be your host today, as I am every day. You're in our third segment here of 4. Today is our first day of the 2014 year. This is January 2nd, and we are discussing this morning the deplorable state of tyranny and abuse and oppression that we are receiving every day from our government-sponsored terrorists headquartered in Washington, D.C., and in your state capitals. Ladies and gentlemen, we have lost all connection to the rule of law, not only in our federal government, but in our states. Your states are operating in conjunction and in connection with the same abusive tyranny that's coming out of the federal government. We're going to touch on a couple of topics here in reference to Missouri. And the reason I say that is because here in Missouri, we have a problem with the Riverways, which is an area here in the state where they have declared these state or they declared some state land, and it was ceded over to the federal government where they had control of these rivers. But in addition to that, we have in Missouri, we have this thing called the DNR, which is the Department of Natural Resources, and our state conservation departments. They act as an enforcement arm and a microcosm of the Environmental Protection Agency. They bear no independence. They bear no separation from them. They may claim to, but when their policies are identical and geared towards achieving the same goals, there's no separation, is there? The truth is that where we stand today is, in reference to these issues, is distinctly out of control of our state and our federal situations. Mike, I've asked you to join with us this morning to talk about this. Are you here?
I'm here. Good morning, Mike.
Good morning. Thank you for calling in. I appreciate it. Okay. So we wanted to talk about this Riverways thing because there are a group of hearings coming up in which the citizens of the state of Missouri have an opportunity to go in and have their voice heard in reference to these overall issues. Can you tell us a little bit about, because I know there's a whole series, we had a snowstorm here, they changed the dates. Can you bring us up to speed?
Well, the original hearings sponsored by the Park Service
right.
will be on the 7th and 8th of January next week.
Okay.
On the 7th, 6 o'clock in Van Buren, Missouri. On the 8th, 10 a.m. in Salem, Missouri. 6 p.m. in Kirkwood, which is near St. Louis.
Right.
Interestingly enough, Kirkwood is totally outside of the Riverways area and is the home base of the Missouri Sierra Club.
The Missouri Sierra Club, yeah. Mike, it kind of reminds me, when I look at that scenario, like you're taking a poll from the folks in New York to determine whether or not they ought to pave the runways at the Chicago's O'Hare Airport. I mean, I understand that they might have an opinion, but since they don't live in Chicago and they don't have to pay the bill or put up with the inconveniences that are associated with that, why would they have any bearing or any weight?
The Park Service says it's because the people in Kirkwood recreate in the Scenic Rivers area. My response to that, though, was in all the years I lived in Springfield, I would recreate in Branson, and I had no say in what Branson did.
Right. Well, I may recreate in New York, but it doesn't mean that I have the right to tell the mayor I'm going to drink a greater than 16-ounce soda or use more salt on my cheeseburger.
Exactly. Now, a great many people, including many of our elected officials, did not, and some of our property rights and freedom groups, did not believe that we had enough public hearings scheduled. More free speech is better.
Right. Especially
Senator
more
Mike
free
Cunningham
speech
and
that's...
Representative Robert Ross sponsored a meeting 2 weeks ago in Houston, Missouri. They had about 100 people there, including a representative from the Park Service. And tomorrow night, Friday, January 3rd at 6 p.m., at the Senior Center in Thayer, Missouri, That's
Right.
on Front Street, right by the police station, easy to find.
Right. So, tell me.
Are you there, Mike? We had an interruption.
Yeah, I am here. Can you hear me? Mike, can you hear me?
I can hear you. There was a little commercial in the background.
Okay.
I think it's gone now.
Okay.
Now
Just
the
reiterate
meeting
that
tomorrow
again for
night-
the benefit of the listeners, what you just said. I'm sorry, because it was distracting. Mike, can you reiterate what you just said a moment ago in reference to the dates?
I can. There is a news broadcast in the background that I can hear. Can you hear that?
I can't. But I can hear it coming from your side, but I can't hear it here on mine.
Okay. Mike, because I can't hear you, why don't I hang up and call you right back?
Okay. I'm not sure what that is, that distracting. Bear with me a moment. Mike, can you hear us?
Are you there, Mike?
Yeah, can you hear me?
I can now, yeah. Just a little technical difficulty with that.
Okay, I apologize.
And
I'm
now,
not sure
the
if it was
meeting
on my
tomorrow
side or
night, is
yours,
it-
but
I assumed it was yours. It's a radio broadcast, but
okay.
Anyway, the meeting tomorrow night is at the Thayer Senior Center, 6 p.m. Now, we have invited the Park Service to send a representative. Senator Cunningham will be there, and he will be explaining how to fill out comment forms that he will provide.
All right.
And
these comment forms will go onto the record?
Yes, this will go onto the official record. It can also be done online, and Senator Cunningham will explain that at the time.
Okay.
We will also have, for questioning, representatives from Lieutenant Governor Peter Kinder and Congressman Jason Smith, and we have invited representatives from Senator Roy Blunt and Senator McCaskill. We are hoping that they will show up.
Now,
we'll also have representatives from other organizations. The Voice of the Ozarks, Jerry King, will speak for just a few minutes and take questions. He's been involved in this. Also, the Ozarks Heritage Project, a man named Rick Mansfield
okay.
will be there speaking. Oh, by the way, let me mention, this meeting tomorrow night is jointly sponsored by 3 different organizations: the Property Rights Coalition, the Campaign for Liberty, and America's Voice Now.
Great.
And Mr. Mansfield will also be filling people in on an event he has on Saturday in North Shannon County at the Pull-Type Campground, which is one of the areas where they plan to restrict or ban boat motors if the new rules pass.
Right.
It'll be at 1 o'clock at that campground. They'll be offering free boat rides, hot dogs, a fish fry, and in the evening they'll take people with fishing licenses out for gigging. So he'll fill folks in on that. This is also the fellow who is trying to organize 100 trucks pulling boat trailers to go to the Kirkwood meeting in St. Louis to
Right.
demonstrate sportsmen's support for the Park Service backing off on this.
Mike, is there a phone number where folks who are up in the Kirkwood area could contact you if they've got questions about, or if not just necessarily in Kirkwood?
Let me give you 2 different numbers.
All right.
Mr. Mansfield, who knows quite a bit about the Kirkwood group, is 573-663-2269.
Okay, give it again.
And my
573.
number for the meeting tomorrow night is 417-264-2435.
Okay. Mike,
You
give
know,
those
one thing I
numbers.
wanted to
Mike, give
mention,
those
too, about
numbers.
their
Mike, give those numbers out again, please.
Okay. Mr. Mansfield is 573-663-2269.
Okay.
And my number is 417
Right.
264-2435.
Okay. Great. I'll make sure I give him that one
thing I
more
wanted to
time.
mention, too, about the new rules the Park Service has
Yeah.
is traditionally, since the Park Service was formed by Teddy Roosevelt, a wilderness area could only be declared with the approval of the congressman from the district. Congressman Smith has indicated that he will not approve the wilderness area they want to create, 3,000 acres that would basically not be available for human use. Since he will not approve it, much like President Obama's executive orders when he can't get laws passed that he likes, they have decided to simply treat the 3,000 acres as though they were wilderness area under the same rules, even though they are not wilderness areas.
So you're saying that even though these aren't declared wilderness areas and they are not reiterated so in law, they're going to act in open, blatant abuse and say that they are treating them that way, even though they may not be designated as such.
Exactly.
Okay.
Basically
I mean,
ruled by fiat. That's the
right.
way I look at it.
Right. I mean, when we've got, I mean, that if you don't follow the rules that exist, then why bother to have any rules at all?
Exactly. Yes. Now, I really encourage everyone who possibly can to come to this meeting and to the other meetings, because there is an organized effort by the Sierra Club and similar far-left groups to try to restrict human use of this area.
Right.
Also, one thing we'd really like to see people do is show their support for an effort underway to return this federal park that used to be state land and private land.
Right. And return it back to the
state of Missouri.
And frankly, Mike, that's my preference. You know, I mean, I don't want a plan of no action by the National Park Service. I want a plan of how are we returning this back to the ownership of the state of Missouri. And you know what? When I first started talking about this with some other folks, and you and I and a group of other folks in the property rights coalition groups started having this discussion amongst ourselves, the goal was to say, let's stop being on the defensive here and let's go on the offensive and take this property back, because that's frankly the only way that we're ever really going to have control. Other than that, it's like us sitting there begging our slave master to stop the beatings, which gives him the assurance that he has the permission to continue because he makes the rules.
Now, returning this land to the state is supported by Congressman Smith, by Lieutenant Governor Kinder, has an op-ed piece out in several newspapers today on it, by Representative Jeff Pogue, by Senator Mike Cunningham, Senator Doug Leibla.
And these are the representatives.
I would encourage people to call their representatives and ask them to support it as well.
These are the state legislators, for those of you who are listening, that are representing representatives in the region where these rivers are. And
yes.
You know, the truth of the matter is, folks, listen, you know, if the folks up in St. Louis area, in Kirkwood area, really, you know, their argument is they have a say in this because they recreate here. Well, with all due respect, a lot of folks recreate over in Wyoming in you know, the national parks over there, or they recreate out in Arizona in the national parks there. But it doesn't give them a say in how those parks are administered or what the uses may be of those parks. Everywhere else that type of an argument would be promoted, you would be shot down by the National Park Service. But in this case, they're going to utilize a tactic to engage and utilize their own friendly forces to accomplish that which they would never allow you to use as an argument against them. It's inconceivable.
That is true.
Well, all right, Mike, thanks so much for the call. I appreciate it. And by the way, we're going to talk, and stick with me, Mike. You don't have to stay on the line with me, but we're going to talk about this Missouri bill that's hitting the Senate, that's scheduled to be debated in the Senate, in the House Senate, about crippling the implementation of the Affordable Care Act within the state of Missouri. So
wonderful.
Thanks so much, Mike.
I'll be listening.
Talk with you soon.
Bye.
Okay, folks, that was Mike Slack. And again, those phone numbers, if you have any interest in attending any of those meetings, you would like information, even if you can't attend the meeting, but you'd like to have input, or you'd like to participate or assist us in any way, shape, or form, Mike can be reached at 417-264-2435. That's 417-264-2435. The other gentleman can be reached at 573-663-2269. Okay, again, that's 573-663-2269. 2269. All right. Before we get into this topic with Obamacare, I've just got to say a quick word for a couple of our sponsors. Make sure that you visit our friends over at the Battery Station at 303 Washington Avenue in West Plains. They can be reached at area code 417-257-7799, and you can find them on the web at the batterystation.com. Just plain batterystation.com. They are one of the largest distributors and shippers of flashlights and batteries and backup batteries and all kinds of things. They've got laptop batteries and virtually everything but watch batteries. And they also carry a lot of tactical gear. They have frozen or freeze-dried food and bulk food products that they can talk with you about. They carry tactical gear, including bags and all kinds of things. Make sure that you give those folks a call. If you go in there and you'd like to participate in our co-op program with them, we offer a food co-op program that's open only to America's Voice Now listeners. It's really not something that you can participate in unless you're local. So if you're not, you'll just have to bear with me on this. But the program basically enables you to go in there and choose from a list of products where you can buy 50-pound bag of rice or grain or wheat or sugar or salt or whatever, oatmeal, 25-pound bags of dry goods, where you can store that stuff away. Now, you're buying it at wholesale rates, and so it enables our listener base to benefit from a significant program that they would ordinarily never be able to obtain on their own, and we have folks that have easily indicated that they save 50% on their food bill. So make sure that you're participating with them on that. It's the Battery Station. You can get to them at 303 Washington Avenue in West Plains, 65775. You can call them at 417-257-7799, and or you can get to them on the web at batterystation.com. Okay, I want to thank our friends over at the Patriot Cigar and Tobacco Shop. They're at number 2 Court Square, and that their phone number, by the way, they're right on the square in West Plains, and you can't miss them. They're right behind the barbershop, Wits End Classic Barbershop. Their phone number is pretty awesome. It's 417-257-1776. Now, they are purveyors of pipe tobacco and pipes, cigars of all kinds. I mean, literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of cigar choices in there. They have humidors in there. They have a little lounge where you can literally sit and smoke a pipe and chat with some other like-minded folks. You can sit and have a cigar. You can watch a football game or an event on television. Great place if you're interested in having a party of some sort, a bachelor's party maybe, or anything along those lines. Make sure that you contact them and ask for Sam. You can reach Sam at, again, 417-257-1776. And then also, while you're there, you can certainly see Jason, my friend and a real American patriot. He is the owner and the barber at Wits End Classic Barbershop. Jason does a great job. He cuts my hair about once a week, and I like to keep it short. It's just much easier to deal with. When I was a teenager, I used to have hair down in the middle of my back. Most people would never believe that, but that was the truth. And I've got pictures to prove it. But Jason makes sure he keeps me on the straight and narrow and the clean cut look, and he does it for $10 a haircut, folks. I mean, where can you get a haircut for $10 anymore, right? And I mean, it's like stepping into a barbershop from the 50s or something, because you go in there, maybe even earlier, because you go in there and there's a couple of fellas sitting around waiting to get their haircut. There's a couple of stools there. They're like antique barber chairs. These guys do straight razor shave jobs and things like that for you. So where else can you get a hot towel shave anymore, right? Make sure that you visit Wits End Classic Barbershop on the square in West Plains, and then when you're done there, step right through the door into the back where the Patriot Cigar Shop and Tobacco Shop is. I think you'll be impressed, and I know that you'll really like your haircut from Jason. Also, make sure that you give a call to my friend Jason Henry. He is at number 10 Court Square in West Plains, and he is an attorney there that specializes and handles criminal cases of all kinds, whether that be something as simple as a speeding ticket or something along the lines of a small drug charge. He handles larger cases all the way up to federal cases for drugs and firearms. If you've ever been, if you're one of those unlucky felon in possession recipients where you have been charged with ownership or possession of a firearm while you're a felon, he handles those types of cases. And I can assure you that he's an excellent attorney. He's done work for me on a personal level, so I can vouch for him on a personal level. He's been very successful. And he is a guy who I feel confident in this type of work because I've seen the dedication that he applies to his job. You can reach Jason by calling him at 417-256-4100. That's 417-256-4100. He's located at number 10 Court Square. That's number 10 Court Square, and it's right above what used to be the old West Plains Bank building. There's a radio station down beneath them, and he's in the upstairs floor there. Give him a call if you've got a legal case that you want to discuss with him. Again, that number is 417-256-4100. His initial consultation will be free, and I'm confident that you'll be very appreciative of his labor and services. Okay, so let's get on to this issue here about the Missouri bill that will gut the Obamacare and ban the healthcare exchanges here in Missouri. Right now, the Missouri Senate is considering this bill, which will effectively allow us to fast-track this bill in and get rid of Obamacare in the state of Missouri. And the concept is if enough states step up to do this, folks, it will gut the Obamacare bill because the federal government won't have the resources to continue to do this, and they will have to go into each of the states if they start refusing. Now, in Missouri, we're not one of the states that set up an exchange, so the federal government is handling it on our behalf, even without our approval or appropriate authorization. And so there are 4 steps. Ban state enforcement participation and material support, reject the Medicaid expansion, protect the residents from the mandates that are in the bill, and then challenge the IRS's illegal Obamacare taxes. Folks, this is what activism is all about. You can support this if you're a citizen in the state of Missouri, and I would like for you very much to fill out a witness form for that. You can find that by going to Missouri First or mofirst.org, mofirst.org. And that's a website created by a friend of ours. When you fill out that witness form, it actually places you directly into the congressional record so that all of your comments have to be included in the decision-making process. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we return, we're going to talk about the one last topic on the bill for this morning, and that is the federal government has submitted a bill which would enable the Democrats to, or this is a Democratic bill, that would enable them to avoid the death penalty for treason and espionage. We're going to evaluate and understand exactly what might be behind something like that. I mean, they're saying that even with the use of a weapon of mass destruction, there should be no death penalty. I don't believe it's all altruistic, folks. I think it's to protect themselves, and we're going to discuss how and where. You're listening to America's Voice Now. Find us on the web at americasvoicenow.org. We'll be right back. All right, we're back. Okay, so before the break, I was telling you that what we wanted to do was talk about this new bill that has been written and submitted by a Democrat out of Maryland. But there are 7 other Democrats that have so far signed on to be co-sponsors. And I got to tell you, this is startling legislation. Because what it says is that it eliminates the potential or the possibility that the death penalty can be imposed for a huge range of federal offenses. Several of them are categories of murder and crimes against the government like treason and espionage. Now, many folks who disagree with the death penalty concept would agree that this is a good idea. They don't want the death penalty at all. And I have to tell you, for many years, when I was a younger guy, I used to stand pretty staunchly on the side of death penalty. I'm going to tell you why I've kind of, over time, migrated my thoughts on that. And I'm not saying I don't support the death penalty, so before I get a ton of emails screaming bloody murder at me, pro, for, or against, or whatever, hear the argument out. The death penalty is unrecoverable. If there was a mistake made in the process, the judicial process, if at some point in time exculpatory evidence comes forth that says this individual wasn't guilty, you can't take it back. You can't release him. You can't cut him loose. You can't say, you know what, we made a mistake and you're free to go. And the reason I'm concerned about it is because my own experience has taught me that the system of justice that we claim to have in this nation is, in fact, more oftentimes more corrupt than the people that they're prosecuting. And your prosecutors and your judges and the prison industrial complex are more interested in accomplishing their goal of self-sufficiency and survival than they are in actually accomplishing true justice. Now, if you could actually have true justice and you could empirically approve of or verify and prove that an individual is guilty of a crime that the death penalty is warranted for, I'm okay with that. In fact, on a personal level, I believe that if someone were to be found guilty of a crime and admitted to that crime and was to get a sentence of, say, 20 or more years, including life or the life of life without possibility of parole and all the variants therein, that individual should be given the option of the death penalty. Personally, that's my belief. And I'll tell you why. One, unless you've actually spent time in prison, you have no concept of what it would be like. And I can tell you right now that a 20-year sentence in prison is worse than a life sentence. Is worse than death. For anyone with a mind that wants to be intelligent, be participatory in its own life. I can tell you that if I were to be sentenced to a life of imprisonment or a 20-year term of imprisonment, and I thought I was going to have to spend that time in prison, even if I thought I was innocent and I was not guilty, I would opt to die rather than try to fight my way out of it. And I'll tell you why. I've done 3 years on a crime I didn't commit, and I know how that destroyed a lot of what I believed was the right things for us to be. Well, I don't want to say destroyed. I want to say that it has completely and utterly changed everything about the way I look at my life and my involvement around with my government and my co-Americans. This federal Death Penalty Abolition Act, called H.R. 3741, would end the death penalty for assassination, kidnapping, that results in the death of the president or the vice president. And it would also end it for the murder of a member of Congress. Now, that doesn't stop there, because it would also no longer apply to anyone who used a weapon of mass destruction. It would not apply to someone who commits murder via torture, child abuse, war crimes, aircraft hijackings, sexual abuse, bank robberies, or the willful wrecking of a train. It would eliminate it for chemical and biological materials built into a smart or a dirty or whatever you want to call it bomb. Or just some kind of a biological material released into an air supply system or a water supply system or a subway. And it would also prohibit death for treason and espionage. Now, I say that, and I say that last because that's where I want to focus my discussion. The real focus of this law is very, very much akin to the law that was just recently renewed by the House of Representatives and then immediately jumped on by the Senate, which was the passage or the renewal of the Firearms Act, the Undetectable Firearms Act. Now, that was originally passed in 1988, before anyone had even figured out how to create an undetectable firearm, before 3D printing, which is essentially what they're deeply concerned about now. And I got to tell you why. They may couch this with a bunch of other stuff around it to give it legitimacy. But the real crux of this, the real heart of this bill is that they cannot, that there will be no death penalty for treason. And the reason I say that is because, like the bill that was passed by Congress to extend, and by the way, they did it by a voice vote. Now, that is the height of unaccountability. When the Congress of the United States uses a voice vote, it's always for one reason, so that no one can track or hold their particular representative accountable. Voice votes are very rarely used unless it's something that could be used by the constituents to hold their representative accountable for something that would become an unpopular vote. Banning firearms is definitely one of those, folks, even if they are undetectable. And I got to tell you, the real reason that they banned undetectable firearms is they're terrified of this idea of 3D weapons. The 3D printed weapon, the plastic gun that doesn't have any way to prove that it exists underneath your coat or in your jacket or in your pants pocket or wherever. Their fear is not just that the gun will have non-metal parts that can't be pulled out of an X-ray or something along those lines, or a magnetometer, but more importantly, that as the technology improves, someone may figure out a way to create a complete plastic gun that may get off one or two or multiple shots and have no metal parts whatsoever. They don't know what the future holds technologically speaking. And their real concern is not whether or not someone steps onto a bus and uses a firearm that's made of plastic to kill you, or you and a group of others on a bus or in a mall or in a school or in a hotel. Their real concern is that they would not be safe themselves from angry constituents who would do them harm for their behavior. Now, there will be those out there who will argue that this is not accurate, that I'm wrong, and that's okay. You're entitled to your opinion. I respect it. This is only mine. I'm not suggesting that this should be taken as gospel. In fact, I tell you, never take anything I say as gospel. But do your own homework and your own research. Make sure you do your own due diligence and formulate your own opinions. But my opinion in this case is that this Federal Death Penalty Abolition Act and the prohibition against undetectable firearms and many, many other regulations that are passed by the federal government are not passed for the benefit of the citizens at large. They're passed for the exclusive protection of those who would be your rulers and oppressors. the truth of the matter is, why would they sponsor such a thing? You have to ask yourself that question. Dig for the truth and find it. Why would you say that someone who's used a weapon of mass destruction, domestically or wherever, should be free of the risk of a death penalty sentence or penalty? I mean, if someone were to commit a heinous act that was murder by torture, which is one of the listings of the crime, you know, the crimes that would be affected by this: aircraft hijacking, sexual abuse, bank robberies, torture, and child abuse. I got to tell you, I can't say that, because I believe that if empirical proof can be produced, and there's zero question, because either and preferably the perpetrator admits their guilt, then I'm okay with the death penalty. I mean, if someone says, yes, I did it, knowing that the death penalty can be one of those potential results, then I'm okay with the death penalty. In fact, as I stated earlier, I think that anyone who is given the death penalty should have the option to say, I want out, and I'm willing to take the injection, or whatever method they choose. They may choose a firing squad. They may choose gas. They may choose whatever. It would save the taxpayers a boatload of money. Do you know what it costs to keep a person in prison, and the constant forced required appeals under a death penalty? You know what the cost is of all of the appeals that are for a life in prison charge or penalty? I mean, the cost of keeping a taxpayer incarcerated, or the cost to taxpayers of keeping a criminal incarcerated for life, are astronomical. And quite frankly, if there's no hope of that person getting out again, and that individual knows it, I think you would be surprised at how many individuals would say, I opt for the death penalty. I willingly request the death penalty. I think you'd be stunned at how many would opt for that. I think a lot more than you would think. Now, The Hill magazine or newspaper comes out and says, the legislation specifically prevents anyone from being sentenced to death or put to death for federal offenses after the bill becomes law. Anyone who was already sentenced to death for a federal crime prior to the bill taking effect would have that sentence reduced to a lifetime prison sentence without any possibility of parole. Which, I mean, I make it clear. Lifetime prison sentence without a possibility of parole is worse, in my opinion, than a death sentence. The problem is, the sponsors of this thing are 8 total, or 7 co-sponsors, and the bill's original sponsor. Donna Edwards from Maryland. Elijah Cummings. Now, he's the guy who sits up there with ISA on the investigation of the IRS and constantly tries to give them a way out, wiggle room. Keith Ellison. He's the first Muslim to be elected to the U.S. Congress. I got to wonder, Muslims seem to dish out the death penalty with extraordinary frequency for pretty much anything. And here's the first Muslim to be elected to the U.S. Congress that says he doesn't want it. I got to call that CYA. Because if you ever looked at some of the other stuff that Keith Ellison stands for, you'd understand why. Barbara Lee, California. Hank Johnson. Hank Johnson, this is the guy, this is the dimwit who said that the island of Guam would tip over if we posted too many troops on the island as they got off the ship. And he wasn't kidding. And I am not kidding you. If you've never seen that video clip, you owe it to yourself, if for no other reason than just to get a good belly laugh. This guy is so stupid. Now, his aides came out later on and tried to say he was just kidding. But if you watch the clip, there is no doubt in your mind he was not kidding. And basically he stated in an open hearing, questioning a general as to whether or not the island of Guam would literally tip over and invert if too many troops got off the ship and onto the island. I kid you not, folks. The general was so stunned, it took him seconds, I mean like 5 or 10 seconds, before he could even respond. He was speechless. Hank Johnson has signed on as a co-sponsor of this bill. John Lewis from Georgia, Jan Schakowsky from Illinois, which appears to be almost the land of traitors. I mean, what is up with Illinois and Chicago and every politician who seems to come out of that state? Jose Serrano, Democrat from New York, is also actively pushing the immigration agenda. I tell you right now, folks, I believe that this is CYA. Dr. Irwin has a couple of notes in here. He says, nothing happens in politics without a reason. Certainly, members of the United States Congress, who are more preoccupied with fundraising for their re-election than with legislating, don't propose bills without a reason. We must therefore ask ourselves the reason for H.R. 3741. Is it motivated by altruism, the highest and most selfless form of charity? He says the answer is in two clues. One is the bill's sponsors. And the second issue is the bill stretches credulity by the sheer scope of the crimes for the elimination of the death penalty as a punishment, including even such egregious acts as genocide, mutiny, sedition, murder by use of a weapon of mass destruction, not even a nuclear bomb or poison gas. Not to mention assassination of the U.S. president or vice president or members of Congress. If genocide doesn't warrant the death penalty, think Hitler, what would? Why not just abolish the death penalty altogether? I would submit to you, folks, that the real issue here is not that they have a real target on the death penalty. They are terrified, however, that it may well be used against them. And I say that because although the Ministry of Propaganda, the mainstream media out there, would have you believe that the world and the country are, massively in favor of big government and the oppressive regime we currently have now, I got to tell you, the truth is being held back by the Ministry of Propaganda so that you'll never quite grasp the level of allies that you have. And I believe that they recognize, and this is one of the reasons why they've been jackbooting the DHS and inserting and injecting millions and millions of billions of rounds of ammunition to them and injecting military supplies and hardware into local police forces in states and cities and counties around the country. They know that there's some real big trouble brewing. They know that there is about to be a second revolution in this country. Peaceful as it may be, but at some point, some of these people are going to be held accountable for their actions. I believe, for the same reason as I stated, earlier, that is the reason why the House passed by a voice vote, so it was completely unaccountable to American citizens, the prohibition against undetectable firearms. They don't really care whether you're killed by one. You're collateral damage. It's expected that you're going to lose a few as the sausage is made. It's expected that there will be collateral damage. They just can't use the term collateral damage when they talk about Americans because, frankly, if they did, it would be a problem for them. Public sentiment would not be willing to accept that from them. But mark my words, when they're talking about you behind closed doors, you're collateral damage. You're no different than the tomato that falls out of the basket or the cantaloupe that falls off the side of the truck or the calf that dies in the cold. We are crops. We are part of the food chain of this elitist oligarchy we now refer to as our government. But I've got to tell you, where we are is under tyrannical rule. Nothing more and nothing less. So, we're going to wrap our show for today. Please communicate with me. If you like any of the segments that we've done, if you would like to comment on them, if you have ideas you'd like to input, and I'm actively looking for ideas to cover the first topic we talked about, which was massive peaceful civil disobedience. I'd love to see a good plan come together, and I'm willing to hear your ideas about it. You can do that by contacting me at Mike at americasvoicenow.org. That's Mike at americasvoicenow.org. Please make sure that you send me, put something in the subject line so I know what you're talking about. Please do not put me on your chain mails. I don't want them. They are outside, immediately rejected. If you put me on a chain mail, it gets disposed of before I ever see it. I don't want them. I don't want to see them. But communicate with me, and don't send me a link to a YouTube video and tell me, here's what I think. Go watch this. I want to hear what you think in your own words. Otherwise, don't bother, because I don't want to hear what somebody else thinks, which you've adopted and parroted as your own opinion. You're listening to America's Voice Now. Find us on the web at americasvoicenow.org, youtube.com/America's Voice Now, and facebook.com/America's Voice Now. Y'all have a great day. We will see you tomorrow morning for our second show of 2014. Remember to make your new resolution. Read and resist. 3 words. Read and resist. See you tomorrow.